So news coming out this week that a golden statue was erected outside of a New York City courthouse honoring Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who of course passed in light of not only what would have been the 50th anniversary of Roe versus Wade this past week, but also just this continuing effort for women's rights and to have abortion nationally or legally available. And of course, Biden, as he was tweeting, calling on Congress to pass legislation to codify the women's rights protection of Roe. And then recently, Kamala Harris was doing a speech commemorating the 50th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. And she, in a controversial speech, removed God or creator and life out of the constitutional phrase of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So she, not even overtly, but very obviously was removing God, rejecting him, and same and likewise with Biden. And of course, with this new statue, this artist, this Pakistani-American artist who the statue is called Now, but it was being done or paying homage to this Supreme Court justice who was a very strong advocate of reproductive rights, as you know, all of this stuff is under siege from what was a landmark decision on Roe versus Wade. And so there's a lot of people still trying to bring up names, bring up different things and movements, right? And so if you do not have spiritual eyes to see, and just take a look at this statue, right? A lot of people giving parallel to Medusa, right? And if you look at this here, it looks like Medusa. Other people saying that it is Lilith, the mother of demons. Like, think about this. Medusa, it was for Greek mythology. Lilith, you can look this up, but just this Adam's descendant and, just this crazy stuff. But basically, with this mythology or this literature, it's literally symbolizing and it's showing and taking part of these things, right? And even this person, the artist, in her, I don't want to say even innocence, but is saying, quote, this statue has, quote, curling braids and tentacle-like arms rising from a lotus flower. And so a lot of people are going to look at this and just say, oh, no big deal. It's a golden statue. Yeah, it may look like Medusa or Lilith and these things. No big deal, right? But if you literally are open and in terms of your spiritual alertness and discernment, you would literally look at this and you would be appalled. And what you have to realize about this kind of stuff, and the reason I'm bringing these topics up, a lot of people are going to brush it off like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a stupid statue. Move on with your life. But what you have to realize is it's the bigger picture here. It's the bigger story of where a lot of people are leading people, what legislation, what kind of attention is being brought to certain things, and what's being allowed. So many people, they have this just, I don't even want to say this in any offensive way. And if you're dealing with this, that's okay. But they have such an inward focused sort of Christianity. You have to deal with your own sin. You have to try to figure out who God is and your growth process and these things. And they don't have a capacity to look outside into the world and see what's going on, right? And if you think about the story of the golden calf in Exodus 32, a lot of the people, and the story is being shown from the point of view of a high level, from God's point of view, from Moses, and just a top-down view. And the story, very quickly, is that when Moses went up to get the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, the people, the Egyptian or the Israelites with Aaron, they were left and they had, from just being presented all of these things on how to sacrifice, burn incense, and sacrifice to the Lord, they literally took that, did a 180. They demanded that Aaron erect this golden calf. And so Aaron basically took his authority and said, hey, give me all these earrings and all this stuff, make it into a golden calf, erected. And then he declared that burnt incense, offerings and these things, burnt offerings and peace offerings be given to this calf, and literally declared, in place of God, this is who brought you out of Egypt, and we should eat, drink, and just do these things because this is great. And so they literally took what was holy and godly and they twisted it for sinful gain. And now you see that from a top level view, and you would have righteous anger, right? Even God, he was hot with anger, burning with anger, and he wanted to consume them. And Moses, of course, had to intervene because God literally wanted to start a new nation, the Bible says, out of Moses. But because Moses intervened, his wrath was relented. And he took the calf, burnt it, ground it to powder, and then made the people drink it out of the water. And then he went on and had a lot of people slayed, right? So it was that serious to the eyes of God. And if you see it from that perspective, you would realize how utterly disgusting and how utterly repulsive it is to God when you erect statues, idols, gods, and things like that for purposes other than to worship God. And so this is from that perspective, right? And a lot of people, even if you just put yourself in that situation, right? A lot of people are so caught up in, their own maybe marital problems. Like imagine being one of the Israelites. You don't really know what's going on with Aaron, and all these people are starting to bow down to some calf, and you don't really care about it. And you're like, oh, that's no big deal to me. I've still got my marriage problems. I'm dealing with my depression and anxiety. And yeah, they're a little bit distant, far removed from reality. But if you look at, again, this story, read the story and see from the perspective of a high level view, then it matters to God. As much as all these other things that are close to you matter, these things at a political, at a country, at a societal level matter to God. And a lot of people are going to still laugh at this being like, dude, it's no big deal. It's just some statue. But whether it is this example, a blatantly obvious example of a satanic declaration or ritual, right, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and just this whole fight with abortion, even if you're not convinced about that, I'm literally telling you there is spiritual blindness for many of you, right? But this is blatantly obvious. I'm taking something very obvious and I want to expand it to other things. God, he's a consistent God. His viewpoint, his heart, right? He's a gracious, merciful God. He's a loving Father. He's Abba Father. But you have to realize that God, if you don't have a balanced view of God, then you don't recognize this aspect, this character, this perspective of God. So when God is looking down at some of these statues, and quite literally, it's a very literal parallel to this golden calf. It's literally a golden Medusa, golden Lilith, that this is a detestable act to God. And if you don't recognize it and you think, oh, it's okay, no big deal. And if you're one of the Israelites here at that time, you're seeing Aaron declaring these things and saying, oh, what's the big deal? It's just some golden calf. Let's go worship it, yip-de-doo, right? You have to realize in context how God is seeing these things. And so this is one example, but there are many, many other examples. And a lot of people, like I've said, they are not in a position to have the capacity or the openness, the spiritual sensitivity to see these things in action. And I want to give you guys a quick example. I used to travel a lot. And by traveling a lot, I mean literally every week for years and years, I would go to many different cities. I would fly out Monday morning or Sunday night. And I worked in consulting, if any of you know of business. So in management consulting or strategy consulting, you travel all the time. And I had clients in all different places, and I would get to see many different cities, right? And so as I was traveling, I was dealing with work, but something that was very strange to me is that consistently, week in and week out, as I went to a new city, as I went to a new principality, right, new area, there would be different struggles. I would be open to different things. And because sometimes I would have my guard down, sometimes I wouldn't pray ahead of time, sometimes I was struggling with something, sometimes my spiritual guard was up. When I go to that city and then I come back, there were different things I had to go through at the time as I was fighting the type of mental battles, the type of people or the interactions I had. And for each city, each domain, each area, there was clearly something different. And it would be like a light switch. I would fly, and there were times where I would fly, and it wasn't like once in a while. Literally every week I would go to a city, and sometimes very consistently. I flew to Portland, for more than a year, literally every week, Chicago to Portland and back every week. I flew to San Diego and back every single week. I've been to many, many different cities, and I have such a sample size of the cities and the traveling that I can conclusively say that even though I was consistent in my life, circumstance or whatever it is, every time I landed or went somewhere, there were certain things that was dictating that principality. A lot of people are going to still laugh at this. Like, what are you talking about, bro? It's Chicago, it's Portland. They're all the same cities. Stop reaching for things. But you got to realize that certain cities And I'll speak for Chicago, right? There's so many in certain neighborhoods. There's such a stronghold for, a lot of attention is given to murder, right? There are some cities in the world that the per capita murder is very low, and others it's consistently high. There are other areas for which it attracts certain types of cultures, LGBTQ and other things. There are some cities for which there are just more churches for some reason. I've been to many churches in Texas, right? For example, I've lived and have been in Dallas. I've been in many different cities, and you can literally tell what's being prayed over in that geographic area. And again, people are going to laugh at that, but it's because you haven't expanded outside of what you're dealing with spiritually on your own. And so once you start progressing and growing in your spiritual sensitivity and your discernment in an area outside of yourself, so many people are just struggling with their own internal problems. And yes, you have to get through that. But once your capacity increases, you will be able to see definitively that when there are certain idols, certain statutes, right? And statues, but also statutes, laws and rules and things like that, regulations over a certain place, it dictates there's spiritual domain over that. And this invisible sort of war that people kind of just laugh off, once you are more aware of these things, you will clearly see that, oh, this is what is ruling over them. This is what has handcuffed and imprisoned these types of people. And so I say that because as this kind of statue goes up, right, it's doing certain things. It's establishing and worshiping and giving credibility and just homage to things that should not be there. And God, yes, he's gracious, he's merciful, and for whatever reason, he's allowing this to happen. But it could very well, if he wanted to, and he's burning with anger, just like with the Israelites, his hot, burning anger could allow him, and he's justified to do this. He could literally, utterly destroy a people group, an area, and he would totally be in the right. And people are going to argue with me on that, but I'm telling you, this is how God sees sin. And so I'm not here to say I know what the war is going on in terms of how people are interceding. Maybe they're praying for, forgiveness, similar to how Moses was doing it in this chapter. But this whole society and life of this jousting effect, it's very consistent with the spiritual battle that was shown in Daniel's time, right? We saw a glimpse of that when the angel was coming to give a message, or any other place in time. The same thing is happening now. Principalities, Satan, certain things. People want to divert your attention from God. They want to have you erect different idols, different statues, different legislation. So I'm saying this because so many people, they want to have this boxed in Christianity. Yeah, Jesus, he wasn't a political quote unquote person, but he is, right? He came as a lamb. He's coming back as a lion. And so you have to realize that God, he's a comprehensive, balanced God. And so for you to just talk about, the Trinity and the gospel message, that's all good. Salvation, that's all good. Dealing with certain personal sins, things like that, your own internal conflict, all that stuff, that's fine. But once you expand out of that and you begin to see what's going on in cities, in landscapes, in courthouses, in rules and legislation, cities and states, countries, once you begin to see that kind of ruling, right, and your spiritual eyes are open to how that is manipulating, moving certain people in a direction, having them not go for the Lord, and many other things, you begin to see how important praying in that realm is and how you need to step up. You can't just let things happen, right? So that's why when you are, a lot of people confuse, like, oh, Christians shouldn't be involved in politics. But literally, as it was with Moses, with Aaron, and many other people, if you dictate how a people group should live their life, whether it's for a brother in your own church or whether it's for a nation, like James 5, 19 to 20 says, where it talks about if any one of you wanders from the truth and someone turns them back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. So I say this because whether it's policy, whether it's correcting a brother and sister, whether it's legal, laws and things that constitute how a society should function, these things help to turn somebody from sin, and it covers a multitude of sins. So that's why it's important for Christians, for whoever has influence and authority and power, to be in positions of power to dictate societal things. So this is a war, guys. So this statue, right? This is one example, right? People trying to fight for abortion, Biden. And again, if you're not awake to this agenda with Biden, with Harris and many other people trying to push these ungodly things, right? And then there's other more controversial things where a lot of people you're not even going to be ready for this. I'm giving you something easy that if you are a Christian and you look at abortion and who these guys stand for, right? What they stand for. If you don't even see that, and then you're not angered by it in a righteous way, and there's no outrage in the sense of the way that God is trying to view it, then I'm telling you, you have been spiritually blinded, or you do not have the capacity yet to see. So I'm bringing this up because one of my objectives as the Lord is leading me is to awaken people to this time, especially from a big picture perspective. So I just wanted to give you guys this quick encouraging word. Love you guys. Pray, stay prayed up, and you have to fight, right? If you have the capacity and the calling to do it, now's the time to step up. So love you guys. Talk to you guys very soon.